Well, to talk about Donald Trump's security issues with Canada, we're now joined by Pierre-Yves Bourduas, who is a former RCMP Deputy Commissioner who now heads up his own public safety management firm. Mr. Bourduas, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of Mr. Trump's concerns in a moment, but I want to begin with whether or not you are surprised that the once and future U.S. president would express such concern about what is the world's longest undefended border.
Not surprised, at least, and anyone that actually tracked the electoral process and listened to what the former president was talking about, and looking at Mr. Trump 2025 project, a 900-page document that clearly highlights some of his vision as to his next presidency and some of his expectation. He clearly talked about public safety as being one of the main issues that he wanted to focus his attention on.
Okay, so one of the main issues, let's break it up now based on what we saw on the that post that he put onto Truth Social, beginning with drugs and fentanyl. Just what is the volume of illegal drugs transiting across the Canada-U.S. border, and from Mr. Trump's perspective, from Canada into the United States?
Well, the thing is, if you look at the latest statistics with regards to the actual fentanyl seizure by the American authorities coming from Canada, compare that to Mexico, it's actually 0.1% of fentanyl seized in the United States that was coming from Canada. So therefore, these numbers do not actually reflect some of the sentiments that the American authority feels about Canada, and that could be misguided just to look at the sheer numbers and fail to consider the larger picture with regards to how our American counterparts are affected and feel that Canada is not delivering on safety and security for their borders.
Okay, so a disconnect when you actually look at the number coming from Canada into the United States. What about illegal migration, though? Because we've certainly seen an increase of migrants trying to get into Canada at irregular border crossings, rather. But what about the flow into the United States? Are we looking at a marked increase there?
It's ostensibly over the last 3 years, there's been a slight increase, but nothing compared to Mexico, where in Mexico, for instance, you were looking at ostensibly about 1.5 million illegals trying to enter the United States, compared to a mere 25,000 over the last year coming from Canada. So therefore, again, numbers are not telling the whole story. And the other element, Michael, that you need to factor in is in Project 2025 for the soon President Trump, the clearly highlighted throughout his electoral campaign that he wanted to actually expel from the U.S. over 11 million illegal migrants. So in Canada, we need to factor that in, because the last time President Trump was elected as president, he clearly triggered movement of illegal migrants heading towards Canada. If you recall the Roxham Road, within the following year that Trump was elected, over 35,000 people enter our country to Roxham Road. So it created a huge problem, and I suspect that this policy with regards to expel over 11 million illegal migrants out of the U.S. will create a huge pressure in Canada. And the other factor is that the President-elect Trump wants to actually ask American authorities to effect all of these deportation, and therefore would create a huge problem because of a lack of capacity in the U.S. to deal with border issues. So if you look at it holistically, President Trump is pushing the pressure on both the northern and southern border and asking neighbors to ostensibly take the load off the U.S. authority that will be busy, I suspect, dealing with this public policy of expelling all of these people out of the U.S.
Okay, so let's follow that through then. The numbers are not huge, Canada into the United States, but this migration crackdown, which Donald Trump is promising, will potentially create a huge challenge for Canada. So why then do you think that when we hear from Mr. Trump's incoming border czar, Tom Homan, and he is from a border town, he describes our shared border as, quote, a huge national security issue. Why make that argument from the American perspective if, as you say, and I think Canadian authorities are preparing for this, the greater pressure will be migrants from the U.S. into Canada rather than the other way around?
Correct. But they also, you look at, historically speaking, some of the cases that we had with the U.S. with regards to international criminal syndicates. And there's been, over the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of frustration building south of the border with the American authorities about the slow judicial process that we have in our country. Case in point, the Jordan Supreme Court decision with regards to the time limit for an accused to be processed through the court system, which resulted in a lot of dismissal of very important cases that law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border have worked on. The other decision, Stinchcombe, which with regards to full disclosure of prosecution and prosecutors' material, also affected the relationship between the United States and Canada, because the United States have clearly indicated that they are rather frustrated with how slow the judicial system is within our country. This issue was also flagged by the Canadian Association Chiefs of Police that clearly indicated that they needed additional tool to be able to tackle modern and current transnational criminal organizations. So therefore, this is also permeates through the discussion with regards to the lack of the perception of the lack of border capacity and the judicial system in Canada to deal with all of these issues.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps more than just the actual numbers, but as you say, the judicial impacts as well. PY, really appreciate this. You helped us understand the issue that much greater. Appreciate the time this evening. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, Michael. Take good care.